If a tornado hits your house, would you blame nature? How many people will probably just put the blame on nature? But a philosophy called Naturosophy would argue the opposite, in fact, telling us that nature can never do wrong. It's a common conception to believe that what is natural is not always good. Naturosophy would call this the biggest lie humankind has ever convinced themselves. But what is Naturosophy? It's a philosophy that doesn't want to be a philosophy, or in other words, it's a philosophy of its own. It identifies mediums as the systems we create, which includes philosophy, science, religion, or politics, all with the aims of helping us understand nature. But by this recognition of mediums, it tells us that they are not nature itself, and therefore we can get stuck in the mediums and attach ourselves to illusions of nature rather than embracing nature itself. These attachments can form dependence, and thus we have man-made authority as opposed to natural authority. From this comes the distinction of the man-made versus the natural. But Naturosophy makes it clear that just because something is man-made does not mean it is inherently unnatural. This means our mediums can work for nature, or it may work against nature. What is natural is defined as what is correct, sensible, real, honest, unforced, original, rational, truthful, and so on. For nature as reality, the honest, the truth, birth, the origin, the all, and so on. Because Naturosophy claims that many of the different words we use all point to the same thing. Because of this, naturality is morality, which directly defies the appeal to nature fallacy in philosophy. Yet, Naturosophy claims that if we do not make this appeal, we would be making an appeal to denature. And this is chiefly the reason why Naturosophy is at odds with philosophy. Since everything ever created is seen to owe allegiance to nature, and everything can be learned from for nature, those philosophies which have acknowledged this are emphasized, which includes Stoicism, Transcendentalism, and Taoism. Naturosophy claims that these have all broken the appeal to nature fallacy and argued against a man-made or materialistic world for the reason that we are naturally supposed to appeal to nature, and our misunderstanding of this is precisely why the world has become unnatural. It is that many people have accepted illusion as reality, becoming denatured, or in other words, desensitized and dehumanized. The trend among these nature-based philosophies, Naturosophy claims, is that the subjective man-made whim and impulse is to be dictated by nature, universal and eternal principle, natural law, Tao. But just how can we, in our mediums, creations, or ideas, work for nature rather than against? Well, we may not create things with the intent of working with nature. We may disregard nature or think we can do whatever we want to nature. Surely this would not help. But even in this case, we may end up working with nature. In fact, Naturosophy argues we have to, in that one way or another, we will learn to work with nature, which is why those philosophies which embrace this to least disregard nature as much as possible can be more powerful than others. The lesson isn't specific, since everything has a nature of its own, with natures within and throughout, making a forever study. We can look at existence, usage, and occurrence as three separate scenarios using the word natural in different ways, as for example, poisons in nature that are natural to exist, but not necessarily natural to use in relation to the nature of humans. Is it the fault of nature that humans have touched the poison? Our learning ability was given to us by nature. Why blame nature with our nature as but to self-destruct? If what we do works, it works. It's our nature working with nature. Our harmony with nature thus relies on knowledge and time. Naturosophy means the knowledge of nature. And so it specifically tells us that time tells all truth, time heals all wounds, and nature is good insofar as it is known. In other words, our work must sustain. It must become effortless. It must not violate the nature of nature. In other words, it must work with what we are given and what has always been. And if health is effortless, we won't need to worry or even speak of health. In the same way, if nature is natural or right was right, we need not these terms, for they exist due to their opposite. But let's get more practical. Let's look at more specific examples. We can take the smartphone as an example medium for which we may use for social behavior. But social behavior, being a natural act that has always existed and the smartphone not, means that we need to be able to see that we don't need the smartphone in order to socialize. If we did, the smartphone would be considered natural, which is where illusion binds us. We find out social media can be quite antisocial due to this effect. Naturosophy compares this specific example to that of an additional body part that isn't necessary. Not only do we create a problem that doesn't need to exist, but we ignore the obvious solution. And it's not that the man-made items should not exist at all, it's that we must recognize its limited nature, and then it won't have to exist. We must bear in mind that everything we create, we have created from nature. We took select parts from nature and put it together, and therefore everything we create is limited when compared to nature. It is here where we see the problem of an illusioned perception, attempting to create a duality and separation from nature when we are one part of the whole. We could end up gratifying how many people are getting healed or how many mechanical arms are helping people, not seeing that this means more people are sick or unable to function naturally. To see this, we would emphasize prevention rather than treatment, the holistic big picture mind versus the confined mind, the approach of natural medicine to work with nature rather than to try and attempt to replace nature, to eliminate unnecessary harm or effort, to optimize and sustain life. We justify a man-made drug to fix the problem another man-made drug created. Or we may even choose one over the other and play the game of lesser evils, still, however, partaking in evil. This is an appeal to denature. Naturosophy claims that if we would continually live in the ignorance or lack thereof nature, we would be living in illusion where our creations take over creation itself. We think we may become gods, and we thus make an appeal to denature. We create involution. Thus, we must not forget who we are. We must learn and observe. We must use our nature or lose our nature. Evil, the unnatural, cannot create anything new. It can only take what already exists and attempt to change it. And then evil becomes greater evil when it's permitted, as again, it's the unnatural accepted as natural. In other words, transhumanism is not to be embraced, though it may exist. Artificial intelligence may exist, but as long as we see beyond it, we are able to control it, and Naturosophy claims we will be able to then further develop it without conflict. However, we may then find how irrelevant of a focus it becomes because we aren't constantly looking and projecting our insecurities and needs. We can't become the tools of our tools. All things good, according to Naturosophy, are those things so essential to our nature, indescribable, so we can't replace, but can only attempt. And being that nature is equated to truth, the answers are all here and given, simply needing to be figured out. Not just freedom of speech, but freedom and speech to begin with. It may also include beauty, love, creativity, and so on. And if we get wrapped in the medium or material or man-made things, we may not know what these are anymore. Confusion is the sign that we have lost touch and need to return to nature. Even worse is being angry and seeing nature as evil, as would be a willing appeal to denature. And now we may return to the tornado scenario. What good does it do to blame nature? Are problems from nature not inevitable? Even if they aren't, We can only do what's in our control, and our perception dictates our actions. We only get upset because we may lose our man-made things, not live where we want to live, or we didn't have the knowledge of how to work with nature. Is it worth blaming nature for our own ego and ignorance? If we have the ability to learn or even prevent problems, do we take responsibility or blame nature to not take responsibility of problems that don't need to be problems? In Naturosophy, a scenario like a tornado would be called a natural problem. That is, of course, if the tornado isn't actually man-made. But nonetheless, if it's inevitable and unavoidable, it must be learned to be embraced. Naturosophy claims that if we try to control the uncontrollable by being mad at nature itself, humanity will abolish itself, as we are part of nature and we're descendants from it, owing to it our health and very being. Natural problems can also be understood when it comes to freedom, as we may see the chaos that naturally dwells within, or the fact everyone is unique and will never all agree on the same thing. These problems become unnatural or worse when we don't learn from the natural. Remember, the excuse to be ignorant is the appeal to denature. As a step further, Naturosophy in seeing beyond mediums, seeing natural problems, emphasizing Stoicism and Taoism, and recognizing natural authority, claims that governments are man-made and based in violence, serving no natural function and being parallel to slavery. Governments require indoctrination and imaginary nobility, hypocritical basic morality, and conquest upon peaceful peoples to exist. And they never last despite people believing in their natural existence, causing the number one cause of unnatural death known as democide. Government and slavery are considered unnatural. Naturosophy teaches us, then, that we can't fear nature's natural anarchy, with both its natural problems and natural solutions, because we would create chaos or the unnatural despite claiming or desiring to create order or the natural. This is similar to our seemingly good intent to create something, but assuming its natural existence, unable to see the natural reality beyond. From this lens, order can only take place by allowing people to live their own lives, and not creating an authority in man, but operating entirely voluntarily, as it does not violate any individual's nature or nature's authority itself. Naturosophy claims that governments are the greatest threat to nature due to their disregard and attempt to replace nature's authority, thus being the greatest appeal to denature. Just like the abolitionist cause against chattel slavery, Naturosophy claims that people must merely be educated to understand their self-ownership, their nature, and that nobody has the right to rule. It is entirely based on a belief, which is called statism. Since people naturally go about their lives voluntarily and order manifests itself all over nature, it only makes sense humans learn to leave other people alone, and recognizing their freedom means freedom for all if it's based in nature. Now, you may think it's a natural problem that humans think they can disregard nature, as it would be to say it's natural for the unnatural to exist, but this is a contradiction. People will always make mistakes, so it's natural to disregard nature by accident, but to disregard intentionally and to allow such disregard continually, this is unnatural. The natural and unnatural conflict with one another and can never be together, because the unnatural is just an illusion. It cannot persist. It has no worth. So why does it exist? It doesn't, but we try to make it so that it does. Back to the concept of oneness, of seeing how everything is nature, including you. If you disregard yourself, you contradict yourself. It's no surprise internal confusion contributes to external confusion. Thus, if you go against your own health, expect to receive problems because nature ever stands firm in its authority. The natural problems like unintentional mistakes are just balancing mechanisms to prevent the unnatural, the intentional mistake. Again, the natural problems aren't to be seen as problems because they are natural, But the unnatural problem is the result of the natural problem ignored. In other words, unnatural problems arise when we don't learn from natural problems. We create illusion when we don't know or embrace nature. This also insinuates that the unnatural problem will go away on its own and no longer be a problem with the increase of the natural, naturally because nature is beyond illusion. So in summary, Naturosophy teaches us that nature cannot be defined or put in a box, hence the broad concept of knowledge versus ignorance, and the humble view of knowing you know nothing in order to attain new knowledge. Nature sets our limits, and simultaneously forces us to escape our own limits. If we use one man-made thing, we cannot forget about the other, or we falter to see more of nature. And if we only see these things, even if many, without nature, we also falter. Nature must always be regarded. It is the greatest physician, teacher, scientist, and jack of all trades. There is a time and place for every natural nature, and it is our role to understand it. We can't develop artificial intelligence if we don't have natural intelligence. We can't develop philosophy if we don't have naturosophy. We can't see the fake appeal to nature, that of ignorance which leads to the appeal to denature, if we don't see the real appeal to nature, the approach of knowledge in regard of all things. Naturosophy claims the many truths regarding nature may be helped into being revealed by studying nature, approached in 3 steps if we are to simplify our teachings. 1. Taking a step back. 2. Radical honesty. And 3. Compensation. Taking a step back means sit down and be present and develop mindfulness around all that you do. Being able to learn from the past and ever present for the future. Radical honesty means to always be honest, ask questions for honesty, allow honesty, and seek the honest. As for compensation, for what man-made things do exist in our lives, their effects are natural, or compensated by that which is natural. We may think of some technology as having amazing benefits of nature, but we must ask, is it nature? Can it truly replicate nature? Naturosophy challenges humanity with the test of time to continually prove that nature cannot be challenged. Through every subject matter, the natural is recognized as opposed to the unnatural. What is also differentiated as the distraction or unalignment versus the direction or alignment. What path do you pave? What philosophy do you follow? Thank you for watching. If you found Naturosophy interesting, feel free to read the foundational books, notably Sapientia Naturae, the guidebook, to learn more.